Public narratives often simplify Christian Horner's downfall: scandal, conflict, dismissal. But when you examine the full set of facts, the story becomes far more precise. Horner didn't fall because of personal allegations. He fell because his grip on Red Bull's internal power structure had weakened. And in Formula One, losing control from the inside is usually the beginning of the end. After 20 years in charge, Horner was used to having the final say. But post-2022, the balance of power shifted. Political backing eroded, key figures began to leave, and on-track performance no longer masked the tension behind the scenes. When Helmut Marko publicly suggested that Red Bull would have recovered sooner had Horner been removed earlier, the message was unmistakable. Horner was no longer seen as the solution, but as part of the problem. That statement matters. It came from someone who helped build Red Bull from the start. It wasn't a casual opinion, it was a public justification for the dismissal. And that moment appears to be the real turning point. Horner didn't respond publicly, but he didn't accept the narrative either. Instead, he stepped away from the paddock only to re-emerge with rumours that are far more deliberate: Alpine, equity, and full control. This isn't an emotional comeback. It's a calculated one. With ownership, Horner cannot be removed through internal politics in the way he was before. And if Alpine becomes his platform, the message is clear. Horner wants to prove that his downfall at Red Bull was not a failure of leadership, but a failure of the system that pushed him out. If you want to understand where this story is really heading, make sure you subscribe now, and let's get into the full analysis. To understand why this matters so much to Horner, you have to separate the scandal from the mechanism of his removal. In 2024, Horner was investigated twice over allegations of inappropriate behaviour towards a female employee. Both investigations cleared him. No wrongdoing was found. Red Bull did not remove him then, and crucially could not justify removing him on those grounds alone. What changed was everything around it. Performance began to slide from mid-2024 onwards. Red Bull lost its aura of inevitability. The RB21 in 2025 was increasingly described as narrow-windowed and difficult to extract performance from. Max Verstappen still delivered, but not with the same dominance. The constructors' position deteriorated, and internally, confidence in the direction of the team eroded. At the same time, Red Bull experienced a significant exodus of senior personnel. Adrian Newey departed for Aston Martin. Jonathan Wheatley left for Sauber/Audi. Will Courtney moved to McLaren. Each departure on its own was survivable. Together, they told a story of a team no longer unified around its leadership. Horner insisted publicly that Red Bull had strength in depth. But Formula One paddocks read between the lines. When senior figures leave simultaneously, it is rarely coincidence. It is usually a response to instability at the top. This is where the power struggle becomes central. After the death of Dietrich Mateschitz in 2022, the internal equilibrium of Red Bull Racing shifted. Helmut Marko later explained that although Horner was team principal, ultimate authority always sat in Austria. Marko described how Horner, backed by Thai shareholder Chalem Uvidya, attempted to consolidate control after Mateschitz's passing. Marko was explicit. He said that Horner did everything he could to take control of the company, and that the Austrian side resisted. This wasn't personal, Marko insisted, but structural. Yet the consequence was unavoidable. Horner's position became politically exposed. When results dipped, that exposure became fatal. Red Bull did not need a scandal to justify change. It needed a moment when Horner could be framed as a risk rather than an asset. And that moment arrived in mid-2025. The most telling evidence came after the fact. Helmut Marko stated publicly that Max Verstappen would have been world champion had Horner been dismissed earlier. That is an extraordinary thing for a senior Red Bull figure to say. It reframes the entire season. It implies that Horner's continued presence delayed recovery. Marko didn't say Horner was incompetent. He said Horner was obstructive. And in F1 politics, that distinction is everything. Red Bull replaced Horner with Laurent Mekies, and although the change was not immediately transformational, Verstappen mounted a late resurgence and finished just 2 points behind Lando Norris in the championship. That sequence of events strengthened the internal belief that the decision had been justified. For Horner, this was the most damaging outcome of all. Not the dismissal itself, but the narrative that followed it. The idea that Red Bull improved because he left. This is why the Alpine rumours matter. Horner is not positioning himself for a conventional return. He has reportedly turned down approaches where he would operate under an existing hierarchy. Aston Martin was explored and rejected. Ferrari was never a clean fit. Horner does not want to report into a system he cannot control. Alpine, by contrast, offers a structural opening. Renault owns the majority of the team, but 24% is held by Otro Capital, an American investment group that includes high-profile figures such as Anthony Joshua, Rory McIlroy, Ryan Reynolds, and others. That stake, acquired in 2023 for around €200 million, is now reportedly available. Multiple reports state that Horner, backed by a consortium of investors, is exploring the purchase of that stake. The goal is not symbolic ownership, it is leverage. Ownership would allow Horner to become an owner principal, similar in model to Toto Wolff at Mercedes. When asked by De Telegraaf about talks with Alpine, Horner did not deny them. He simply declined to comment further. Alpine did the same. In Formula One, that combination rarely means nothing. The context at Alpine makes the picture clearer. The team finished last in the 2025 Constructors' Championship with just 22 points. Renault has shut down its Vauxhall engine program, committing to Mercedes power units from 2026 onwards. Management turnover has been frequent, stability has been absent. Flavio Briatore, now executive advisor at Alpine, is a longtime associate of Horner. Their relationship is well established in the paddock. Briatore has been pushing for structural change, and at 75 he is unlikely to want a long-term operational role without a strong partner. For Horner, Alpine represents something very specific: a broken team, a new regulation cycle, a power unit, reset, and, crucially, a governance structure that could be reshaped. This is not nostalgia. Horner is not chasing relevance. He is responding to a reputational wound. Helmut Marko's comment turned his exit into a verdict. Alpine offers the possibility of a counter-argument. If Horner succeeds at Alpine, the story changes. His Red Bull exit becomes political rather than performance-based. Marko's claim becomes debatable rather than definitive. The system, not the leader, becomes the villain. But the risks are obvious. Alpine is not Jaguar-era Red Bull. The sport is more complex, more regulated, and less forgiving. Mercedes power units remove one variable, but they do not guarantee competitiveness. Ownership brings authority, but also accountability. And then there is the question of personalities. Briatore's history is controversial. Horner's recent past is polarizing. Combining the two could stabilize Alpine or destabilize it further. What is clear is that this is not a quiet return. Horner is not re-entering Formula One to make up the numbers. He is attempting to rewrite the final chapter of his Red Bull story. And that brings us to the real question. If Christian Horner does take control at Alpine, will it prove that Red Bull and Helmut Marko were wrong to push him out? Or will it confirm that the problems followed him, not the team? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Was Horner a victim of internal politics, or did Red Bull make the right call at the right time?